Thank you everyone for being here today. I want to thank Safe Work for providing me with a platform to share my personal story and journey. My family's journey has been one of anguish and turmoil, one which began back in 2018. It's certainly not a journey I would choose for myself, nor would I wish it upon my worst enemy. This is a journey filled with heartbreak, psychological troubles, counselling and many other enduring challenges. 6 years on from that fatal day, I can now say I experienced some good days, yet still endure very down days, especially on days of significance. I'm trying my hardest to make it through each day to rebuild our lives as a family so my late husband would be proud, to build awareness and do my part in the prevention of further workplace incidents. I will continue to do this in the name of my late husband, Lyndon Quinlivan. My objective is to enlighten you about the real-life situations that individuals like myself face when dealing with the loss of a loved one due to a workplace incident or when dealing with a workplace fatality or serious workplace injury. I am confident that by sharing my story will equip you with the necessary skills and knowledge to better understand the difficulty my family had to endure and still endures to this very day. It's a constant battle of trying to navigate our new normal. What I am about to discuss today is from my own personal opinion and recollection. I'd like to start by asking you all to take a look at the slide of typical everyday people like you and I. They're just normal Aussie workers with one difference. They never came home, or they were severely injured and were never the same. I am personally connected to each person here, either by family member or directly. I'll go a little further to say that some of them are in this very audience. They've all permitted me to share these images with you today. I would like us to take a moment and pause to acknowledge these workers who suffered significant injuries and who did not return home. We take this moment to honour the dead and fight like hell for the living. I am here today to also represent our This Week group, which was formed in November 2020 by the New South Wales State Government. I am pleased to say I co-chair this group along with Matthew Backhouse. Our primary objectives are to work alongside Safe Work New South Wales and other government and non-government bodies to provide them with valuable insights as to better understand and enhance their processes. This in turn will assist people like myself, other members of groups like ours, and all affected families who have unfortunately found themselves thrust into these waters. Our group comprises of severely injured workers and loved ones of those workers who were killed on the job. It is important to mention that every workplace injury and death is 100% preventable, and we strive to work towards this goal. In our time with FISWAG, we have achieved things like the development of online and printed resources for families who have lost a loved one or been injured at work. We've filmed numerous member videos which are available on the FISWAG webpage and Safe Work New South Wales YouTube channel. We've been in attendance at events such as the Ministers' Roundtable and Press Release, World Congress and WHS shows, just to name a few. The reason we share our stories of tragedy is simple. We need to kick complacency to the curb. We need to make everyone aware that such things can and do happen. Sharing our stories make an impact on those listeners and starts conversations about safety. In May 2018, an incident took place at Albury's North Viscol paper mill, whereby 3 workers were overcome by toxic levels of hydrogen sulfide gas, also commonly known as rotten egg gas or H2S. My husband had been working there since he was 18. He was aged 35 at this point, and yes, he was one of those 3 involved in this fatal incident. He loved his job and he knew it well. His father was also working there on this fateful day and had been working there since its opening in 1981. Lyndon was the most safety conscious person I had ever known, and he was also a first responder out of the mill. It didn't help much when he was one of those 3 employees needing assistance, and unbeknown to them at the time, they just inhaled fatal levels of H2S. Let me backtrack a little to the day of the incident. On the 24th of May 2018, it was a normal day in the Quinlivan house. Lyndon kissed me and the kids goodbye as he did every day and went to work on a day shift. It was a scheduled shut, as they called it. A day when the machines were down and they had to do repairs and maintenance and cleaning. They regularly did this and there were no issues. I got the kids ready for school, dropped them off and went to work as I normally did. As a self-managed superannuation fund manager at the time, we were busy with my work with end of financial year vastly approaching. I was in a meeting when I received that dreaded call. To top it off, it was from my father-in-law. The next days became a blur, but at the same time, I can recall every minute detail. I got to the mill where I found out that basically Ben, Lyndon and Tom had been overcome by toxic levels of the deadly H2S. I didn't know much more other than the paramedics were trying to get Lyndon's heart working. Someone eventually came into us and said, they have his heart working, he's in the ambulance being taken to Albury Base Hospital. I remember feeling a sense of relief wash over me as his heart was working. He was going to be okay. We got in the car and went to the hospital. The hospital were waiting for us. We walked in and I said my husband had been brought in and we were immediately ushered into a very small room. My in-laws were with me and my father-in-law had to be taken back to the ED for checking, as he was also working at the site and was affected by the deadly gas, as were numerous of his crew members who were also in emergency. When he was given the all clear to return back to us, he came in, his head down. All he said was, "Benny's gone." The doctors came in several times but couldn't give us any information other than they're still working on him. Again, the doctor came in after waiting what felt a lifetime, from 2 to 7 p.m. with nothing. And then he just said he was very sick. It didn't register with me. I was adamant that Lyndon would be okay. I guess looking back, you could call that the start of the denial stage. I knew the doctors were getting frustrated that I was not comprehending the severity of the unfolding situation. In the early hours of the following morning, I was then struck with the horror of having to decide to turn off my husband's life support. His mother was beside me, nodding her head, giving me the approval that we must let him go. I had been with Lyndon since I was 15 years old. Then, a 32-year-old woman about to become a widow. I shouldn't have had to make that decision. Nobody should. Every person deals with grief differently, and it's crucial to understand there is no right or wrong way to grieve. Me personally, when the incident took place, I was in complete shock and couldn't function for a very long time. To be honest, there are still days I really struggle. Trying to come to terms with and process the fact that my husband and small children's father was not coming home was impossible. Watching my in-laws try to deal with the loss was also heartbreaking, but they kept strong for me and my children, their grandbabies. I'm forever indebted to them and the strength they showed and continue to show. The mill operated on shifts known as crews, and the crews became like family as they were always on shift together. They worked shift work, and when they were on their days off, they were all very family orientated. Davin, or Dav, was Lyndon and Ben's supervisor, and he was also a part of the furniture at the mill and a very good friend of both Lyndon and Ben. Would you believe they all had the same car, a Mazda BT50? I'd often speak to Lyndon when he was at work and I'd hear Dav say, "Is that you, Jacci?" Approximately 2 weeks after the incident, Ben had his funeral and then we held Lyndon's. Both families ensured that they would be given their own farewell days. The day after Lyndon's funeral, I had a call from the mill saying they needed to speak to me. I broke down saying it sounded really bad, and I remember my mum saying, "Nothing worse can happen." I rang my in-laws and told them to come over as we had news the mill needed to share. It was then that they told us Dad had taken his own life. This was a result of the overarching guilt that it was somehow his fault the boys were dead. He thought of them as one of his own. Let me be clear, it was not Dad's fault. He blamed himself because he sent them up and wasn't able to save them. And remarkably, his life was not counted as one of the incident's workplace deaths. That's inexcusable. In my opinion, the responsibility and blame for this incident in its entirety lies entirely with the company for taking shortcuts and not doing what was required by law. It's the company's responsibility to regularly maintain equipment. It should have had gas monitors installed for H2S levels. It's a known fact that this gas exists as a byproduct of pulp and paper making, and its potential to reach deadly levels. To adequately train and equip all staff. The staff I did speak to said that they'd never had H2S training or even knew that it had the potential to be so deadly. The list goes on. From my recollection, the list of failures for the company received for this incident was an incredible 24. Not 1, 2, or even 3, but 24. It still blows my mind. How can we today, given all the legal requirements, resources, notices, governance, still be killing our workers? What more needs to change to put the accountability back on the companies who are ultimately responsible? I will say, when we did have the sentencing hearing on the 25th of September 2020, the judge was extremely empathetic towards us family members who had been dealt this hand, and he took the time to listen to each and every victim impact statement. There were a lot of them, and they weren't short. Can you believe we had to submit our victim impact statements so the defendants had the opportunity to review what we had written? We're the family members of the victims who were killed, and yet we feel we're the ones who were treated like we were committing the crime. Again, that is something we feel as a group needs to change. Armed with the knowledge that he had, he dealt the PCBU with a whopping fine of $1.35 million. This was the highest ever in New South Wales at the time, so basically it set a precedent. I am grateful for that. However, what downplayed that result was because they entered into an early guilty plea, which wasn't straight away, they received a 25% discount, so reducing the fine to just over $1 million. We are talking about a multi-international company. We get dealt the life sentence and we weren't the defendants. This is written into legislation. This is something that as a collective group for FISWAG, we are quite firm on the stance that this should be reviewed and omitted from legislation, and we will keep pushing for this and other legislation amendments. Our loved ones are not statistics. They are ordinary lay people, just like you and I. Since our case, the fines have been getting larger, but nowhere near enough. It's a start towards changing New South Wales history. New South Wales has introduced industrial manslaughter, which we're all part of, and again, it's a win, but regrettably not in time for our incident. During the first month after my husband's passing, my mother stayed with me to take care of my children and I. I was unable to function. My mother took care of everything, including driving me to appointments, taking my kids to school, cooking and cleaning. I felt like a 15-year-old again. When my mother had to leave to go back to work, I was able to function enough just to take care of my children and attend to the necessary tasks, but I was still so very numb and trying to come to terms with what had happened. I was also trying to protect and shield my young children who were also grieving and trying to understand why their father was not coming home. This particular incident received a lot of media attention. It even made international news. I was constantly contacted by the media through various means, such as messages and friend requests on Facebook, which I ignored, and they even reached out to my employer. It felt like the hounding was never ending. I just wanted to be left alone. I was trying to process it all myself and figure out what our new normal would be. We were also navigating the prosecution process, which we were now a part of. On the 12-month anniversary of his passing, I reached a breaking point. I needed to make change and get answers for me, my children, my in-laws, of how and even why this could have happened. I had secured an appointment through our local MP with the then Minister, Kevin Anderson. Myself and Ben's mother, Deborah, who I have since formed an unbreakable bond with, travelled to Sydney. Photos in tow, and this was one step towards the formation of FISWAG. I say one because each and every founding member and members which followed, each having their own stories of tragedy and courage, coming together and forming what we do today. We strive for change, advise government and agencies and speak to anybody willing to listen to us. We also aim to support families who have since found themselves catapulted onto this journey. None of us wanted to be here, but we all want to put an end to this happening to anyone else. I have said from day one, I am my husband's voice, to speak out because he can't, and ultimately that is why I'm here today. We began the process of dealing with the funeral home. Who knew that so much had to be arranged? I certainly did not, apart from the fact that my mother-in-law knew the process and was able to guide me. I made sure my in-laws were there for those important decisions with laying him to rest. He was my life, my children's life, and he was also their life too. This was a time I was making damn sure we came together, and it certainly did that. I did not envisage I'd also have to deal with the likes of compensation, insurance companies. I was only thinking about how to survive and provide for my kids and save our newly built family home where most family memories are created. During the most difficult times in our lives, when we're dealing with our own grief, we're also having to deal with a multitude of other entities, such as safe work, solicitors, police, unions, the coroner, and more depending on the situation. It's overwhelming, and this also adds to the trauma-filled history each and every one of us has. All of the organisations just mentioned have jobs to do, but the representatives often become complacent and view our situation as just another task. They can't understand how broken we are, and you can't unless you have walked in our shoes. I was talking to a friend at the Workers' Memorial breakfast that I attended earlier this year, and she told me something that really resonated with me. She said, "I've learnt that grief rearranges your address book." That statement couldn't be truer, and that statement has stuck with me today. Grief for us was ultimately losing a loved one, but it extends to losing oneself and all future plans that were made with them. Losing a husband, a best friend, and a father to our children was ultimately the first stage of loss. But then comes other stages nobody speaks about. It involves losing the future plans that were made with them. Holidays, home improvements, weekends away, camping trips. The list goes on. It also involves losing close friends who did not understand the extent of the pain that I was going through. Grief also leads to cognitive decline, mental and physical health issues, and also affected my employment as even the simplest of tasks became difficult to perform. I'll finish up on a positive note though. Through this journey over the last 6 years, I now see life very differently. The little things that once got me down mean nothing in the grand scheme of things. But most importantly, I have gained another family through our bond of losing a loved one. By family, I mean my entire Fiswag family and affected people from all over are who I cherish today. I have built so many close friendships with people who find themselves wading through these turbulent waters. I've also formed a special bond with Deb and Nolene. After not knowing each other before the incident is something I am forever grateful for. We often say, Lyndon, Ben and Dav are up there having a beer, looking down on us, and we know they would be very proud of the changes we are determined to make. Families such as my own and all members of Fiswag are affected people. We are bonded by an invisible rope that is trauma and grief on steroids, with a desire to bring change, accountability and justice. I urge everyone here today to also assist us by striving for the exact same thing. I invite you all to join us in working together to make companies and worksites safer going forward, to step outside the box, speak up if something doesn't feel right. Don't just do it because it's easier. Your safety is your responsibility too. You are someone's whole world. So ask yourself, what would happen to your family, your kids, if you don't return home? Don't think it can't happen to you. It can, and it does, way too often. I'd like to thank everyone who is here today for staying and listening to my story. And on a side note, Fiswag do have a stand here today, so please feel free to drop in and say hello. introduce yourself and take a piece of safety advice home to your loved ones today. Thank you.